"Sir, she hasn't moved since morning." The words were barely louder than a whisper. Yet they stopped Ethan Carter in his tracks. The CEO of one of the largest technology companies in America stood in the middle of a crowded convention center, surrounded by executives, investors, reporters, and security personnel. Millions of dollars depended on the presentation he was about to give. His schedule was planned down to the minute. His assistant was reminding him that the keynote speech would begin in less than 10 minutes. But Ethan's attention was no longer on the stage. It was on the small boy standing near the edge of the crowd. The child couldn't have been older than 7. His clothes were clean but worn. His dark hair looked like it had been cut at home. His small hands gripped the straps of a faded backpack. And his eyes were filled with worry. "Who hasn't moved?" Ethan asked. The boy pointed toward the large glass windows overlooking the street outside. "My mom." Ethan followed the direction of his finger. At first, he couldn't see anything unusual. Then he noticed a woman sitting alone on a bench across the street. Her head rested against the metal backrest. She hadn't moved. Not once. The boy swallowed hard. "She told me she'd only rest for a minute," he said quietly. "But it's been a long time." Something tightened inside Ethan's chest. He looked at the security team. "Call emergency services." "Sir," one guard said carefully, "the event." "I said call them now." The guard immediately obeyed. Within seconds, Ethan was crossing the street with the boy. Behind him, dozens of confused executives watched in disbelief. The CEO who never missed meetings. The businessman known for his discipline and precision. The man about to address thousands of people. He had just abandoned everything. And nobody understood why. Not yet. As they approached the bench, Ethan could see how exhausted the woman looked. Her face was pale. Her clothes were neat but clearly inexpensive. There were dark circles beneath her eyes. "Mom," the little boy said softly. No response. His voice trembled. "Mom." Still nothing. Ethan knelt beside her. Thankfully, she was breathing. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Minutes later, paramedics arrived. They examined her quickly before carefully placing her onto a stretcher. One paramedic turned to Ethan. "Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and dangerously low blood sugar," she explained. "She's lucky someone noticed." The little boy stood silently as they loaded his mother into the ambulance. His brave expression finally cracked. Tears filled his eyes. "Is she going to die?" The question shattered every heart nearby. The paramedic smiled gently. "We're going to do everything we can to help her." The boy nodded. But Ethan could see the fear he was trying desperately to hide. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Lucas." "Well, Lucas," Ethan said softly, "you're not going through this alone." The boy looked up. "Really? Really?" And for reasons Ethan couldn't explain, he meant every word. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly to stabilize Lucas's mother. Hours passed. Ethan's phone exploded with messages. Board members. Investors. Journalists. His assistant. Everyone wanted to know why he had disappeared before the most important presentation of the year. He ignored them all. Instead, he sat beside Lucas in a hospital waiting room. The boy's small legs swung nervously from the chair. "Your company must be really important," Lucas finally said. Ethan laughed softly. "Sometimes people think so." "Then why are you here?" The simple question caught him off guard. He stared at the floor. Because the truth was complicated. For years, Ethan had dedicated every waking moment to building his company. He worked weekends. Missed birthdays. Skipped holidays. Ignored friendships. His success had made him wealthy beyond imagination. But it had also left him lonely. 3 years earlier, his younger sister, Hannah, had collapsed alone in her apartment after working herself into exhaustion. No one noticed for nearly 2 days. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The guilt never left him. Every day he wondered whether one phone call could have saved her. Whether one person paying attention might have changed everything. Maybe that was why Lucas's whisper hit him so hard. Maybe he heard Hannah's voice inside it. Because someone needed help, Ethan finally replied. Lucas thought about that. Then he smiled. That seems like a good reason. For the first time in weeks, Ethan smiled too. Later that evening, a doctor entered the waiting room. Lucas immediately jumped to his feet. "How's my mom?" The doctor's expression softened. "She's awake." Relief flooded the boy's face. He burst into tears. The kind of tears that come only after carrying fear for too long. Ethan felt his own eyes sting. The doctor explained that Lucas's mother, Sarah, had been working multiple jobs while trying to care for her son alone. She often skipped meals to make sure Lucas could eat. She rarely slept more than 4 hours a night. Eventually, her body simply gave out. When Ethan was finally allowed to visit her room, Sarah looked embarrassed. "I caused a lot of trouble," she said weakly. "No," Ethan replied. "You didn't." She glanced toward Lucas sleeping in a nearby chair. "I was just trying to take care of him." The exhaustion in her voice broke his heart. "How long has it been this hard?" Ethan asked. Sarah hesitated. Then she told him everything. Her husband had died 3 years earlier. Medical bills had consumed their savings. Rent kept rising. Every month felt like a battle. Every paycheck disappeared before it arrived. She wasn't asking for pity. She was simply surviving. And somehow, despite all of it, she still smiled when she looked at her son. That smile reminded Ethan of his own mother. A woman who had worked 2 jobs while raising 3 children. A woman who taught him that success meant nothing if it wasn't used to help others. A lesson he had forgotten somewhere along the way. The next morning, Ethan returned to the hospital. Then he came back the day after that. And the day after that. Soon, Lucas began looking forward to his visits. They played board games. Shared sandwiches. Talked about superheroes. One afternoon, Lucas asked a question that left Ethan speechless. "Are rich people lonely?" Ethan blinked. "Why would you ask that?" The boy shrugged. "You always look happy when you're with us." For a moment, Ethan couldn't answer. Because the child had accidentally spoken the truth. He owned private jets. Luxury homes. More money than he could spend in several lifetimes. Yet these hospital visits had become the most meaningful part of his week. "I think," Ethan finally said. "Some people have money but not enough people who care about them." Lucas nodded seriously. "That's sad." "Yes," Ethan agreed quietly. "It is." When Sarah was discharged from the hospital, Ethan made a decision. Not because he felt sorry for her. Not because cameras were watching. There weren't any. In fact, nobody knew. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Through one of his company's community programs. He arranged stable housing for Sarah and Lucas. He connected Sarah with a flexible job that paid fairly and provided healthcare benefits. He made sure Lucas had access to after-school programs and educational support. But he never presented it as charity. He presented it as opportunity. As dignity. As a chance. Months passed. Life slowly changed. Sarah regained her health. Lucas thrived in school. For the first time in years. They weren't living in constant fear of the next bill or emergency. And Ethan changed too. The experience forced him to examine his own life. He realized that somewhere between success and ambition, he had lost sight of people. So he began redirecting company resources toward employee wellness programs, emergency assistance funds, and community outreach initiatives. Many executives questioned the expense. Until employee satisfaction soared. Productivity increased. Turnover dropped dramatically. Kindness, it turned out, wasn't just good for the soul. It was good for business too. 1 year later, Ethan stood on a stage once again. This time, the audience included thousands of employees. He was receiving an award recognizing the Company's extraordinary community impact. The crowd applauded as he approached the microphone. But instead of discussing profits or innovation, Ethan told a story. A story about a little boy. A whisper. A bench. And a moment that changed everything. He never mentioned names. Yet many people in the audience wiped away tears. Because they recognized the truth behind his words. The world changes when ordinary people choose to notice one another. When they stop walking past suffering. When they decide someone else's pain matters. After the ceremony ended, Ethan stepped backstage. A familiar voice called his name. Mr. Carter. He turned. Lucas came running toward him. Now 8 years old, he looked taller, healthier, and happier than ever. Sarah followed behind him, smiling. Without hesitation, Lucas threw his arms around Ethan. "Guess what?" he said. "What?" "I got the best grade in my class." Ethan laughed. "I knew you would." The boy grinned. Then his expression grew serious. "You know what my teacher asked us today?" "What did she ask?" "She asked who my hero is." Ethan smiled. "And what did you say?" Lucas looked directly at him. "I said heroes are people who stop when everyone else keeps walking." For a moment, nobody spoke. Sarah quietly wiped a tear from her cheek. And Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because he had built a successful company. Not because he had earned awards or recognition. But because one day, in the middle of the busiest moment of his life, he chose to listen to a frightened 7-year-old boy. A whisper most people would have ignored. A whisper that saved a mother's life. A whisper that transformed 3 futures. And a reminder that humanity's greatest strength has never been wealth, power, or status. It has always been the willingness to care. Because sometimes the smallest voice carries the message we need most. And sometimes changing a life begins with something as simple as stopping, listening, and refusing to walk away.